The president of the United States has been caught in a major scandal just weeks before the election when he decides to hire a spin doctor to rile up the media and distract the American people. This might sound like something that is happening or has happened in the past, but this is in fact the plot of the 1997 movie Wag the Dog, starring Robert De Niro and Dustin Hoffman. Welcome to Real Conspiracies. I'm your host, PJ Williams, where I break down the occult symbolism and hidden messages in your favorite movies and video games. This is episode 12. I hope you enjoy it. All right, so today I have a special guest with me, Unifier.tv, my friend Daryl. How's it going, man?
Pretty good, man. You know, I really can't complain. Even as much as I want to, I really shouldn't, and I can't. So we're good.
No, I'm excited, man. It's so weird because lately I've been reconnecting with people that I met back, years ago, all around the same time. So I was just on Black and Blurred podcast. I was talking to Joey Muggs the other day, and so it just feels like this cool. Frankie messaged me recently, so it just feels like this cool reunion. You know, I've been podcasting for like 5 years now. Even though we get out of touch with each other sometimes, we always get back in touch with people. So, love having you on, man. I just
reconnected with Joey too. I just reconnected with him. I haven't reconnected with Frankie. Not the same as before. Not yet. She's busy. So,
she's always busy. But I was just saying that to say we've done podcasts together before. It's been a minute, so I'm excited to be doing this again. And you reached out to where we were talking about this, and I always try to let my guests pick if they want to pick the movie, because I love it when the guest has like a fascination with the movie already or already has some knowledge about it. And you picked Wag the Dog, which is fantastic because I've covered this, not in this way, but I covered this a few months ago when I was talking about Project Mockingbird. So I watched the movie back then. I took a bunch of notes on it, and then you suggested it, so I watched it again, took even more notes on it. There's just so much here. Yeah. How, before I get into it, like, when did you first become aware of this movie? When did you first see this movie?
I saw it very late, so I didn't see it until I really started to unpack everything. So honestly, it was around COVID time.
Okay.
Because, I already knew about the secrets of, what they do. They lied to us and all that. I knew that right after 9/11, even though I was in school, and I knew something wasn't right. When I remember going to class when 9/11 first happened, going to class, everybody was glued to the TV and the teacher rolls the TV in and everybody just watching it all day. And even then I just knew something wasn't right before I knew about anything about being lied to. Right. It didn't seem right to me. So right after that, as much as I could at that age, did a little digging, but it wasn't really until COVID time.
Back then you had to have the dial up. So it took a long time to get to anything.
Well, no, so I was uncovering things like throughout the years, but I never really did much with it until that time. And that's really when I started making videos anyway, was right around COVID time. Before that, I really wasn't putting anything out there because I was too afraid to. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what I could talk about without backlash or anything else worse. And so it wasn't until that time I really started digging into all these things that had happened, all these other tragedies and all these other things. And I figured out there's so many holes in this stuff. Yeah. And then I started looking into who's the organization that investigated JFK's murder. I can't remember the people that.
Are you talking about the House on Un-American or the Rockefeller Commission? Am I getting that right?
It's something commission. God, I don't know how I forgot
I talk about this all the time. No, I talk about this commission all the time. And now that you put it in front of me, I'm like, yeah, it's
I feel crazy forgetting something like that.
Yeah.
Warren Commission.
The Warren Commission, the Church Committee is what I was trying to think of.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
The Church Committee was after, that was a different one. The Church Committee was after Watergate. But yeah, the Warren Commission. Thank you. I get that all of those happen around the same time. We're getting the CIA exposed for all kinds of stuff in the late 60s, early 70s. So it kind of blends together in my mind a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah. Same here. That's how I forgot. I'm like, who did that? And when they put together the Warren Commission of people who were just, for the most part, they seemed incompetent. They probably were. But then there are so many holes in what they said happened. Right. It still never made sense. But people bought it. And there were even blank pages in their report. Blank pages. And so after seeing all this stuff and getting onto the dark web and finding all these different things, I was like, you know what? I don't remember what made me stumble upon this movie, but I had to see it. I was like, there's something that's been put out there in front of our eyes that we ignored. Let me see more. And when I watched it, I'm like, it's ugly. It kind of pissed me off.
Yeah.
That this was put out there and people still don't want to believe it because now it's all just a movie.
Right. Well, that's how it works, right? That's how it works.
Yeah.
If they put it into a movie, people go, oh, it's just a movie. So if you talk about the real life things that happen that are exactly the same as this movie, well, that's just a plot of a movie, right? I mean, that's part of the cover up. That's why they're so forward sometimes with what they're doing, is because then people associate the history with a movie. And they just think it's all fiction, and it just blends together in their mind. But yeah, no, this movie became popular again after the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, and then we had the Ghost of Kiev and all these fake stories coming out, and that's all going to make sense. If you haven't seen this movie, I recommend it, honestly, especially if you're a conspiracy theorist. It's one you have to see. But let's get into what this is. So in 1997, Wag the Dog came out. It was an American black comedy political satire film. It was produced and directed by Barry Levinson, and it starred Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, and Anne Heche. And Anne Heche, that's a whole crazy rabbit hole in of itself. Her death last year. I think it was last year, 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
Yeah, about 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was the beginning. Yeah, it's 2022. So this movie is loosely based on Larry Beinhardt's 1993 novel called American Hero. And just a little thing I found on American Hero. I haven't read the book, but it says the original novel was about how Operation Desert Storm was a scripted ploy to get George Bush reelected. And the book suggested that the 1943 bombardier was the inspiration for the conflict's video of smart bombs falling down smokestacks and air vents. So they reference the smokestacks and the air vents a lot in this movie. So there's a lot of references in the movie to nods, I guess, to the original book, the original idea that Operation Desert Storm was a scripted ploy by the Bush administration, essentially, right? Yeah. So that happens. But this movie was then adapted into a screenplay by Hilary Henkin and David Mamet. And the name of the movie is based on this idiom called the tail wagging the dog. Have you ever heard anyone use that idiom before, the tail wags the dog?
No, never. No.
I never have, but apparently what it means is it indicates when you take attention that's supposed to be on something bigger and divert it to something smaller. So you divert it from the dog to the tail, essentially, right? So the tail wags the dog.
And
right?
that never happens. That never ever happens.
Yeah. So I'd never heard that idiom. And it's interesting because the movie takes place right after the president is caught in a scandalous situation just days before the election. It's actually 2 weeks before the election. That's going to almost certainly ruin his chance of being reelected. And this is when he calls one of his advisors to contact a top Hollywood producer in order to manufacture a fake war in Albania that the president can heroically end all through mass media manipulation. So that's kind of the overall plot. I took that basically off of IMDb to give you an example. We'll go deeper into the plot in a minute. But this movie was released nationwide on Christmas 1997. It actually was like selectively screened on other screens before, but it got nationwide release on Christmas 1997. It cost $15 million to make, and it grossed 64.3, which is really good for a political satire. I would think.
Yeah, you made that 4 times as much, I guess.
Yeah, and it only took 28 days for principal photography. I mean, it was like a really quickly shot film. Mm-hmm. And it hits all its points quick. I mean, the pacing of this movie is great. It's only about an hour and a half. It doesn't linger anywhere. It really does just hit all those notes. And if you are into like dark comedies, again, like it's the implications of this movie are what pissed me off, but like the artwork of it is actually really good. Like the acting is great, the comedy's great, the timing and all of that stuff is done fantastically. But then when you start thinking about it, if you're like me, you're like, wow, this is really awful. This is really awful because the implications of it are so true, right?
Well, that's why it surprised me that they were even able to put it out. You said that it was in select theaters, but it surprised me that it was able to spread.
Yeah.
I figured they would do everything they could to shut the movie down. And maybe they just think the viewers were too stupid to connect the dots. Because this is right in the middle. I don't want to overstep, I don't want to jump ahead, but this is, right in the middle of what was going on with Clinton.
Well, actually, that's the crazy part. And I was going to bring it up later, but this was a month before. Like, that's what's so crazy. So this was released a month before the news broke about the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. And following the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal, they basically started bombing. Where was it? I have it in my notes here somewhere. My notes say the bombing of Al Shifa pharmaceutical factory in Sudan by the Clinton administration in August of 1998. So a month after this, or a few months, I think it's maybe 8 months after this movie, but a few months after this movie, the Lewinsky scandal breaks. A month after that, they're dropping bombs in Sudan. It's exactly what happens in the movie, essentially, right? Is like there's a sex scandal in the White House. We start dropping bombs. Attention's averted for a while. You know, we can put things off. We've got Hillary Clinton in the bimbo squad. Isn't that what she called it? The bimbo squad, where she was like in the war room, like threatening every woman that Bill Clinton slept with to like keep their mouths shut. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and then another comparison was made to this movie a few months after that in December of 1998, when the Clinton administration initiated a bombing campaign in Iraq. And then again in the spring of 99, when the Clinton administration intervened in Kosovo and initiated a bombing campaign against the Yugoslavia, which actually borders Albania, which is where this whole like fake war thing takes place. So
somebody was really trying to let us know what's going on. Seriously.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And this is the question though. Could this have been one of those things where they're trying to hide in plain sight, or was someone trying to expose them? It could be one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said it earlier, though. It's like now, you know, this stuff happens right after the movie, and it happens before, right? If you believe what the movie is essentially putting out there, the Bush administration did this, and then the Clinton administration did this, and now the Biden administration is doing this with, you know, Ukraine and stuff like that. It's like this has been going on for a very long time. The movie kind of says it, and then is it one of those cases where people just go, well, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, that's a movie plot. Like you believe movie plot, like, because I get those comments all the time. Like, I can't believe you took this movie seriously. And it's like, the movie is not the part I'm taking seriously. The actual things happening that are the same as the movie is what I'm taking seriously. The Clinton administration dropping bombs in Yugoslavia and Iraq and Sudan to cover up scandals is what I'm talking about. So yeah, a whole lot of stuff there. This movie got an 86% approval rating from Rotten Tomatoes. And the site's critical consensus reads, this is a smart, well-acted, and uncomfortably prescient political satire film from director Barry Levinson and an all-star cast. Roger Ebert gave us a 4 out of 4 stars and said this movie is a satire that contains just enough realistic ballast to be teasingly plausible. Like Dr. Strangelove, it makes you laugh and then it makes you wonder. I think both of those are really well put. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you don't. They did put it together just that way for that reason. That's what I was saying before. It's like, did they count on the viewers thinking like we think, or did they count on the viewers brushing it off? Maybe both. Maybe they were trying to hit both audiences. The ones that would be like, you know what, this makes sense to me, like us, or the ones that don't use the other half of their brain and they're like, hey, you know what, this is just TV. This would never really happen. You know, I think sometimes people choose to overlook it because the reality of it is too much for them. And they wouldn't really know what to do if they really truly decided to believe everything that was put right in front of them. The reality is too much for them.
I mean, that's true about all conspiracy theories, right? Is most people don't want to see the truth. So like you could talk about something like Mockingbird, which this ties into. Big time. And you could point out, as we brought up in the beginning, the Church Commission, which exposed that over 400 news journalists directly worked for the CIA. That's documented history. But if you put that in front of somebody, it's too uncomfortable. And then they just pretend that they literally call it a conspiracy theory, which is retarded. I mean, it's not a conspiracy theory. It is a historical fact. But it gets lumped into conspiracy theory because it's an uncomfortable truth. And this movie is like that as well. This is an uncomfortable truth about how politics works, about how spin doctors work, about how presidential campaigns work. And because it's so on the nose and so true, they can kind of hide it in plain sight because they know that the audience is going to be too uncomfortable to face the reality of it. And the audience is probably going to have an easier time looking at this as, isn't that a funny black comedy? Isn't that a crazy thing? Like, I think it actually works on the level. And I also wonder if, like, I've heard it said that if, you know, you commit a crime, or anyone who commits a crime basically has this urge to tell someone, and the best thing they can do is like have a confidant that they can trust, usually like a lawyer or something like that, because if they don't, they're going to spill the beans somehow. So like, is this that for Hollywood? Like, is this Hollywood saying, here's what's happening, here's what the CIA has done to Hollywood, we're going to kind of put it out there and just kind of alleviate ourselves of that guilt and of that you know,
I think so.
Needing to tell someone.
That's got to be it. Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I would say so. with a clean conscience, I guess they can sleep better at night. Or if any other exposure happens, they're like, look, we put it out there, and maybe they'll find themselves less culpable when everything goes down. I don't know, but I do think so. Think so. There's so many films that, I'm not going to bring up other films that'll take forever, but there are many other things that have been put out there in front of us, and it's always written off as Hollywood hype, movie plot, all in good fun.
Right.
But then, who wrote it? Who directed it? Who produced it? Why were these people involved with this particular project?
Right.
Are they trying to clean their conscience? Are they trying to, expose themselves because of maybe bigger things happen? They'll be, like I said, less culpable, less, maybe they'll be lighter on their, whatever, if they face a charge or whatever it is that happens. Why were these particular people involved in this particular project? And especially if they're all a part of Hollywood. And so I always question that. Like, why did Mel Gibson do Conspiracy Theory? Right. Why did Julia Roberts do the movie? There's Julia Roberts, right, in that movie?
Yeah.
Why did she do the movie with him? Do they both really believe it? We know Mel Gibson does. But it's like, why do these particular actors and actresses choose to sign up for these projects? And I always bring that into question too.
Yeah. So last thing I want to say on the movie, and then I want to get into the plot, and we'll go through this. So Dustin Hoffman received a nomination for the Academy Award, or a nomination at the Academy Awards for Best Actor for his performance. And screenwriter David Mamet and Hilary Hankin were both nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. Those are the kind of biggest awards that it was nominated for. But it was a pretty good, successful movie. I mean, a movie like this is never going to be a blockbuster success, but it definitely did well. It's rated well. It's had staying power. I think this movie's still enjoyable. And if we get into it, this movie opens up with this weird political campaign that's just going over and over and over again. It's really annoying, and it's kind of poking fun at how bad political commercials are and how much people like. I think the meta in this is like how much people think that the political ads matter and they don't. Like, that was the plot of the movie, essentially. But it's got this, we're going to elect the same guy because it's not good to change horses in midstream. And they just keep saying it over and over and over.
Yeah.
And every commercial is cheesy. It's awful. It's bad. The characters are watching the commercial and commenting on it. And what I found interesting is that this campaign slogan is an actual historical campaign slogan. It was the campaign slogan for Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. So it's like, hey, we're in the middle of the Civil War. Probably not good to change horses midstream. Like, that was the campaign slogan for Lincoln back then for his reelection campaign.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thought that was quite interesting, but it opens with this. It opens with this commercial. And then the next thing we get is we're following this guy called Conrad Breen, and they're calling him Mr. Fix-It. We don't know what's happened, but the White House has called in this spin doctor, this Mr. Fix-It Conrad Breen. And we find out right away that this is because the president took a Girl Scout. It's a Firefly girl or something. They don't call it Girl Scouts, but a Girl Scout into the Oval Office by herself. And she's now alleging sexual misconduct against the president. It's going to hit the news tomorrow. So they're trying to figure out how to spin this, how to get ahead of it. It's 2 weeks to the election. How do we stop the president who essentially molested or raped a teenage girl in the Oval Office? Like, how do we beat that? Which is just a crazy plot, especially considering this is when Clinton is in office. So, yeah. And
they knew what they were doing.
Yeah. Well, I don't think this is the first time that this has happened.
No.
But what I find so fascinating about the morality of the film is that zero people ever question, or maybe one person questions it, but it gets like waved away as who cares if he did it. And nobody cares if he did it.
Right.
Like, none of his campaign staff care. Conrad Breen doesn't care. The Hollywood producer doesn't care. I think Anne Heche's character, no, I'm not even sure if she's the one who asked. Somebody asks Conrad Breen at some point, and he's like, who cares? Who cares if the president raped a teenager? We're like, that's not even the plot. It's almost so small in the movie. Like, the movie does such a good job of distracting the audience from the fact that like the heroes of the movie are trying to get a pedophile rapist reelected, that you kind of forget that that's like in the movie.
Well, that's the beauty of the film, because they're showing you in the movie what they're already doing to you as the viewer. Basically,
the movie's so meta in that way, though, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Because it's making you care about the characters in the movie who are all pretty awful in what they're doing to the American people. Yeah.
Right.
So this happens 2 weeks to the election. They need a distraction. This is why they've called in Conrad Breen. And Conrad Breen is so interesting. He's played by Robert De Niro, and he never says who he works for. He never says like what his official title is, how he's able to do the things he's able to do, including calling the Pentagon to get classified files like that, calling someone in the middle of a press conference and getting him to say whatever he wants. Like, this guy has power in a way that like nobody else in this administration has power. And he's never explained. It's never explained who he is. But there's a really fascinating backstory. This is going to step outside of the movie for just a minute. There's a really fascinating real thing happening in Hollywood at this exact same time. And it's in the form of a guy named Chase Brandon. So Chase Brandon was the CIA's first entertainment liaison officer. That's a real position that the CIA has in Hollywood. And before this, he worked for the CIA for 25 years and a couple other unnamed agencies before that. He's got over a 40-year career. And in 1996, the year before this movie gets made, he goes to Hollywood. He was apparently headed for retirement. He pitched this new job for himself at the CIA to work in Hollywood. He's like, hey, my cousin is Tommy Lee Jones, so I've got a connection there. And what he was going to start doing is he's offering his technical expertise and deeper access to the CIA to Hollywood, basically saying, if you guys want your scripts to make sense, if you want to be able to film at Langley, you need Conrad Breen. You need me to come in, doctor your scripts, and make sure that you make the CIA look good. So this guy's working behind the scenes from 1996 to 2007. He's worked on everything from The Recruit, The Summer of All Fears, Enemy of the State, Bad Company, Mission Impossible 3, Meet the Parents, which also has Robert De Niro, In the Company of Spies, The Good Shepherd, Charlie Wilson's War, Spy Game, The Interpreter, The Bourne Identity, which he's on the DVD commentary for. And all of this, supposedly he didn't write these movies. He didn't, quote unquote, write these movies, but there was a court case that essentially proved that he wrote The Recruit, and then gave it to a hack writer who was not able to work in Hollywood because he was such a bad writer. And then that guy put his name on it. And so Chase Brandon essentially made The Recruit, according to a court case that happened. But he didn't write the script for Wag the Dog, supposedly, right? But what's interesting is he did make one script of a movie that never got made called The Rub. And he made the script with Hillary Hankin, who's the one who wrote Wag the Dog. And Conrad Breen, CB, Chase Brandon,
right,
is exactly, his character is Chase Brandon. So I find this whole thing funny that the year after Chase Brandon makes it to Hollywood, there's a movie about a spin doctor from supposedly the CIA with the initial CB. I'm just guessing, speculating at this point that Chase Brandon had a lot to do with this movie is my point.
Oh, maybe a little bit, Yeah. Maybe a tiny.
Him and De Niro worked together on 4 movies, outside of this one. So the idea that him and De Niro had a working relationship going back to 1996 is not surprising, because we know they had a working relationship in 2001 when Meet the Parents came out. Right. Yeah.
Well, I would think, okay, so, what you were talking about before, with a lot of people being part of the CIA and FBI and all that, would it be possible that maybe De Niro is?
Yeah, I think he does propaganda films for the CIA. Meet the Parents is one. Meet the Fockers is another.
He was actually part of the government in Meet the Parents, wasn't he?
He played a CIA retired CIA guy. Yeah,
that's right. So maybe that was exposing him in a way right there. But to know that he was also part of these other films with Brandon,
Chase Brandon.
Right. So to know that they worked together on other films. It wouldn't surprise me if De Niro was an op, and it would be nice to think he was on the right side, but he just came out on The View talking absolutely crazy. So, we know who he's pitching for. So,
one of my favorite actors, also one of the most sleazy people in Hollywood, from what I understand. So
right. He fits every role for that reason. So and that's his real life. And so I guess for me, why do you think though Brandon would choose to put himself in this?
I think, here's what's interesting about the movie is this movie wasn't, it feels like a movie. You know how Hollywood does those movies where they're patting themselves in the back? This is one of those movies, right? And I like a lot of those movies because I'm a film nerd, but they're not made for the general public. They're not a popcorn film. They're not a film that most people are going to go see, right?
Right.
This movie was a movie made for Hollywood. My theory is that this movie was basically telling Hollywood there's a new sheriff in town. His name is Chase Brandon, Conrad Breen, and this is how you're going to cooperate with him. Because it felt, I mean, the movie is a warning to Hollywood in a way, and we'll get to that by the end of the movie. But like, my theory on it, at least, is that Chase Brandon worked on this film to basically tell Hollywood, here's what's going to happen. Here's the power I have. Here's what I can do for you. And here's what I can do to you if you don't cooperate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's my theory on the film.
That makes sense to me. So it was made, it's like I like that theory. Mm-hmm. I like that theory. And like you said, as you learn by the end, you know, I don't want to ruin it, but yeah.
If I hadn't said this before, I always forget to say this. Spoiler, I'm going to spoil the living crap out of this movie. In order to dissect a movie, you have to spoil everything about it. So we'll get there. We'll get there with what happens to Stanley. But the first thing that happens is pitch meeting, right? They got Conrad Breen in there, like, what do we do? And he says, delay the president, tell him to stay in China, whatever, say he's sick, whatever. We need a day. We need to figure this out. And one of the first ideas he pitches out there to get the media talking about something else is he says, well, tell them that, put a rumor out there that we hope that they don't deploy the B-3 bomber. And someone in the room goes, what B-3 bomber? There's no such thing. He's like, yeah, exactly. You're going to deny it. And I found that whole conversation so fascinating. The idea of creating a rumor as a distraction and then their job being to deny it. So that way people will believe it's a real thing. Like, I just thought that like that level of, manipulation and reverse psychology was so fascinating, because how often is that the case where it's like the government's telling us, oh, it's not a thing, it's not a thing, it's not a thing. Oh, it's a thing, and some of those things, are they in and of themselves distractions? Are we taking that bait as conspiracy theorists going, they're trying to hide this, right? But yet they want us to take that bait. What do you think of that part?
And that's how I felt. I think I brought that up to you before about, what was a particular topic? I can't remember what it was, but it was something that I believe that a lot of conspiracy theorists, they knew they would bite and run with. But I was like, well, if they're telling us this is what the truth is, they know we're going to believe it because we're already looking for that result. So what if it's not true?
Right.
They're telling us something fake because we're looking for something of the sort, but now they're giving it to us. So now you really can't trust it.
Well, it's like what David Greer coming out talking about, reverse engineering UFOs. It's like, do they want us to think that that's what they're doing?
And that's the thing. And so I hate that it escapes me, because I think I sent you a text about this, and I think
you did too, but it's escaping me what it was, what the exact subject matter was.
But I was like, do you think that it's not real now? Because they're giving it to us. And if it's coming from them, we really can't trust it. But they know we're going to bite on it because we look for things like this. And so I'm right there with you. I think that they spoon feed us certain results so we could believe it because it's believable.
Yeah. And even deny them on purpose to make us go, oh, they're hiding something, right? And I find that so fascinating is, he talks about they have Boeing on their payroll and how, there's a B-3 bomber, and the rumor starts with the B-3 bomber and it kind of escalates into, well, why would they deploy the B-3 bomber? So it feels like there's so many times this movie where they make the case that something that feels like a natural progression of discovery or a natural progression of a fad, even that they bring up later with the Fad King, is manufactured. Like, this movie really goes that far. And in some ways, I think if the Chase Brandon is working on this, if the CIA is behind this movie, they're also trying to make themselves look more competent than they are. I'll say that much up front. Still, it's crazy. But the idea is they don't want to release the B-3 bomber because there's a war possibly happening. And he comes up with Albania, Albania because can you point out Albania on a map? Does anybody know what their chief export is? Does anybody know an Albanian person? Like, it just is a country we've heard of, but we don't really know where it's at and we don't really know anything about it. So the American people will be duped into believing whatever we tell them about Albania. Kind of like nobody could point to Iraq on a map, before a certain point. Now, I'm still not sure they can. Ukraine, same way. I don't think anybody knew where Ukraine was on a map. But now they think they know a lot about Ukraine. They think they know a lot about Iraq and stuff like that.
But they don't know anything about it, but they want to have bumper stickers and all that kind of flags and everything all over their social media supporting Ukraine. Well, the country is giving Ukraine all of your money that you need in this country. So go ahead. Go ahead. I can't stand those people.
Yeah. There's so many interesting things here, and I don't want to get hung up on every single detail because I have a ton of notes. But This is the part where he's kind of explaining his plan to Anne Heche, and he's saying, who's going to find out, who's going to tell them. Did they find out about the Gulf War? And this is where he makes those insinuations that the Gulf War was fake. And a couple of times in the movie, he insinuates like everything with the Gulf War is what we wanted you to see. We dropped a couple of bombs down chimneys that was filmed on a stage. Like there was no actual buildings destroyed. And what he brings up this Beirut bombing, which is interesting. He says, look, during the Reagan administration, there was a bombing in Beirut where 240 Marines were killed. And the next day we invaded Grenada. And that is one of those parts of history that like I know about, but not a lot of people probably know about the bombing in Beirut. I mean, I know it was in the 80s or whatever, but still interesting that he brings it up and is like, we've been doing this distraction game for a long time, right?
Right.
So from here, their next move is essentially to find a producer, someone to produce their war. And they find this guy, Stanley Moss. It's spelled Motts, but they pronounce it as Moss. The T is silent, apparently. But Stanley Moss. And he's played by Dustin Hoffman. What'd you think of Stanley Moss's character? I mean, Dustin Hoffman was really great in this film.
I loved it. I loved his energy. He had this...
He was like the comedy of the film in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I love how he spoke, but he was so sure of himself. You know, like you said, he'd been doing this. He knew how to run the room, and he knew his stuff.
He knew who to
this
call.
Is what we're going to do. This is how it's going to roll. Let's roll with it. But he just came in and just made it happen.
I like too that he doesn't hesitate for a second. He's like, someone from the government comes and says, "Hey, here's what happened. The president banged a Girl Scout. I need you to help us fake a war." He's like, "It's a pageant," and he keeps saying it's a pageant, which I find very interesting. But they're watching this press conference together. And this is that interesting part where the first question that you think is going to get asked at this press conference, the president gets back is coming back from China. So it's the press secretary in front of a bunch of people. And you think that they're going to turn on and say, "Hey, is it true? Did the president have sex with a Girl Scout in the Oval Office?" And again, this is 2 days or the day after. This is the day after the biggest news, the biggest political scandal, sex scandal in American history, in the White House history ever happens. And the first question at the press conference is, what about the rumors in Albania? Like that he's like, they're that good at distracting people that already like that plot point, which should have been this huge part in the movie, is a background. It's the background to the movie, and it's the background to the political system, to the audience, to us. Like it just fades away that quickly, something that should be the biggest story of all time.
That's actually kind of scary though.
Yeah.
Because we see that now. If we were to backtrack quite a bit, what happened to, because it's the thing. What happened when they started wanting to tell the truth about COVID? And now all of a sudden, I saw this. I meant to send you this. I saw this video where they're talking about, and I think it was a war or something like that. Of course, right? Mm-hmm. So they're talking about a war or something of the sort. And at the very bottom, in the ticker at the bottom of the screen, they said the WHO announces that COVID is officially over. But they put it in the ticker. In the ticker.
Well, in California, apparently it's not over. I have friends out there who say there's still mask mandates in places.
And that's totally insane.
They're like they're like those Japanese guys that got left behind after World War II and thought the war was still going.
Unfortunately, I see it out here a little bit in Texas too.
Oh, that's crazy.
It's really surprising me. But it's crazy because to throw that in the ticker, but not make it big news.
Right.
They're like, we're secretly going to put out what people have already figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, but that is scary though, how they throw these distractions in there, because the bigger news was something else. I don't think it was even that big, but it was smaller than that at the bottom, in my opinion, because that's going to let these people, maybe people can free their face. I don't even know, but that's the thing. Like, it's scary to me because nobody's talking about the children being trafficked anymore. No one is talking about prosecuting Hunter for all of his stuff. Because remember when those videos started.
Well, this is exactly like Hunter, is it not? Weeks before, it's the October surprise of 2020. Hunter Biden's laptop, pictures of him with underage girls and cocaine and all this stuff. And yet somehow the people got distracted enough that it wasn't till after the election that I just assumed everybody knew because I'm on Twitter, I'm in the political sphere, and I'm like, how do people not know about this story? And it was after the election that people are finally, like the normal people, right, are starting to hear about this story for the first time because it was so censored. And this movie, when I watched it, I was thinking about Hunter Biden so often. I was like, this is the same thing, is it not? It's this huge political scandal. It's a sex scandal. It's drugs. It's the president's. And it's beyond that, to be honest. I know we all think about it in the terms of Hunter Biden with underage girls on his laptop. But what's bigger than that is like the financial connections to Joe Biden and their whole pay-to-play scheme in Ukraine and China. Like that was on the laptop too. And it still doesn't get talked about enough.
No. And what about the video that came out of Hunter he chased a girl naked?
Yeah, there's a lot on there. I remember I remember digging into that laptop stuff back in 2020 and it was wild. So
yeah. I remember all this exposure. You can find it on these dark websites, Chinese websites, mind you, of the uncensored. You used to be able to
find on Telegram, video. Which is probably why they arrested the guy who owns Telegram in France a few months ago. So,
but that was a scary thing because Hunter chased the girl down the hall on video. Nobody is talking about it.
No.
These Venezuelan gangs in Colorado, nobody's talking about it. The kids the kids being trafficked, nobody's talking about it. There are so many bigger things going on right now than Ukraine getting all of our money. But it's not being discussed, and it's scary to me, honestly.
I pointed this out recently, but like we're dropping bombs on North Korea again right now. And nobody's talking about it. Yeah, the U.S. is dropping bombs on North Korea again, and nobody's talking about it. We sent 50,000 troops to the Middle East to support Israel, supposedly. Like, we're literally on the verge of World War III, but there's an election when this comes out, it'll be 1 week to the election, right? So this is the perfect time to do this episode. But yeah, there's an election going on, so there's tons of stories that I know that you and me who are like digging into this stuff know about. But I don't think most people, I bet most people watching this don't know that we're started dropping bombs on North Korea again. I bet a lot of people don't know about the 50,000 troops sent to the Middle East because the Biden administration or the Kamala Harris administration, whatever you want to call it, cannot go into an election with people knowing that this administration led us to World War III. It can happen after, right? It can happen after. And that's the whole point of this movie. He keeps saying, like, when he goes to Stanley produce this war, he's like, well, what's Act 1? And they figure out Act 1. He says, what's Act 2? He's like, who cares? Who cares what the American people think after the fact? We won the presidency, right? It doesn't matter if it comes out this whole thing was fake. So that whole thing is going on. I thought it was interesting too that he asks him why Albania. This part was so fascinating to me because this is 1997. It's in between the Gulf War and the Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. And he says, why Albania? And they're trying to come up with the motive. They're like, well, Albania wants freedom. And he's like, that doesn't work. And he says, it's because Albania wants to destroy our way of life. That was literally the slogan for why we had to invade Iraq. They want to destroy our way of life. This was like the spot in this movie right here when he's talking to Stanley in his office and they're planning out how they're going to sell this to American people. If you watch it now and you remember 2001 and 2002, it's mind-blowing. The next thing he says is, well, how are we going to convince that we need to invade? And he says, well, they've got the nuke. right? So we got WMDs in Iraq, right? Which was fake. We now know was fake, right? The Italian agency fed us fake documents about yellow cake uranium from Africa that probably was fed to the Italians from the CIA in the first place. The whole thing is exposed at this point, but nobody cares, right? Because they got their war.
Right.
The next thing he says after the nuke is he's like, well, how are they going to threaten us with a nuke? They don't have a missile program. And he says, what if they put the nuke in a suitcase? Do you remember around 2001, 2002, 2003 when they're like suitcase bombs, suitcase nukes? Every movie had a suitcase nuke. Yeah, that's not a real thing. It's not I mean, as far as I know, it's not possible. But it wasn't even a thing talked about until the Iraq War. So when I watched this movie and I realized in 1997, a Hollywood movie predicts the idea that we'll start spreading this lie that you can put a nuke in a suitcase and walk it over the Canadian border. I mean, this movie is wild when you think about it. It is. I think they workshopped, like in another way, I think that the CIA uses Hollywood writers to workshop things they're going to do in the future. And I wonder if that's what this movie is also in part. Yeah,
I believe that. I absolutely believe it. And that's what I'm thinking about earlier when you were saying that, okay, this happened with Bush, right?
Right.
But that's what I'm thinking about. Are they trying to show, are they doing two things here? Are they showing what happened with Bush at the same time telling you what's about to happen with the Clintons?
And what always happens.
The game, so when it comes out, you're not going to believe it as much because, this came out first, right? So this is I'm thinking maybe they're doing two things.
Well, if you think about it too, if this came out after Bush's presidency and it just looks bad on Bush, right? Yeah. Nobody cares. Clinton's in office. Right. 8 months later, they're going to care that it makes Clinton look bad because, the Monica Lewinsky scandal, but it hadn't happened yet.
Right.
There was a lot of other scandals that happened, though. There was the Whitewater scandal. There was a lot of distraction in the media from all the scandals of the Clintons. The Whitewater scandal was a big one. And then Troopergate? Troopergate was huge. Nobody knows about Troopergate. They all remember the sex scandal, but it was way bigger. There's a lot more going on with the Clintons.
Well, this is before or after the issue with the young girl that Hillary basically laughed at. And the young girl, I think she was assaulted. And Hillary basically laughed at her and
I think
I can't remember if it was before or after that.
It might have been after, but I don't think it was like widely reported back then anyway. So maybe I'm wrong. I'm having a hard time remembering the details on that one. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
but I haven't done a deep dive into the Clintons in a while.
Happened, and Hillary was posted I think she was working in the legal field, and basically the girl didn't get the justice that she deserved because Hillary didn't take it seriously enough. She basically just pissed the girl away and she literally laughed at her in court. And the girl's mom years later lost her mind. But I think this was after that though. But like you were saying, all these different Clinton scandals, you can name a number of them.
Right.
And they were all just swept under the rug.
There's a lot. Yeah, for sure. One of the next things that happens in the movie is Stanley calls up 3 people, and one of them I didn't really understand what her job was. I don't even remember her name, but he calls 3 people. He says, call this woman, call Willie Nelson. He has a different name in the movie, but Willie Nelson, and then the Fad King. And I found this so interesting because the one woman, I'm not 100% sure what she did, but you had Willie Nelson, we have to have a song, we have to have a theme, we have to sell this to the American people. It reminds me of Daryl Worley in 2001 or 2002 when he said, "Have you forgotten?" That was an anthem that was you know what? It's been a year since the Twin Towers and we're not really sure how Saddam Hussein is connected to this, but have you forgotten? I feel patriotic, let's invade, right? So that has its real life tie-in. The Fad King is interesting. We'll come back to him in a minute. But the next thing they do is they film the fake war scene. The one scene they need to sell the whole war, right? People see it on TV once. And this reminds me again of Ukraine with the Ghost of Kiev, right? Snake Island. Remember these?
Yeah.
The whole Snake Island fake video. And it didn't matter that it was fake because at that point, who cares, right? The war, we're already sending billions to Ukraine. Doesn't matter, right? Mm-hmm. So we got that. And he says a line here that I thought was so fascinating. They say, "Are you declaring a war? Or is the president about to declare a war?" And he says, "We aren't declaring a war. We're going to war. We haven't declared a war since World War II," which is true,
right?
Which is wild if you think about it. That can just keep. We've just normalized this process of just forgetting Congress and all the powers and stuff that are supposed to be checks and balances on whether or not we go to war. We're just a perpetual war machine since World War II. So they get to the war scene and they're telling, this girl, you can never tell people that you did this and they'll come to your house and kill you. We get all those kind of things early on. Another thing I noticed about this scene is when they're punching, so they want to give this girl a cat. They're arguing over the cat, which is kind of one of the comedical parts of the movie. And they give her a bag of Tostitos chips, I think. And it's run with these chips. We'll punch it in later as a cat. And what I found so crazy is the tech in that room. It was way ahead of its. That can't have been real in 1997. But then I start thinking to myself, was it though? Was it real in 1997? Is DARPA and all these places, they have tech 50 years beyond where we're at? That was my first question.
I could believe that.
Because he's literally he's just punching in. I know how much time CGI is supposed to take and how much money these they spend on this stuff. But instead he punches up this full fake war scene and says it'll render in the next 4 hours and it'll be done. And I'm just watching this going that's either complete phony BS for the movie or it's tech way beyond its time because they have help from DARPA. But then I thought, the second thought I had on this is none of this matters today because now we have deepfake AI. And what you can do at home with AI and deepfake technology, sitting at your personal computer is insane. So if you think what the media could literally fake today and how little it takes to get people to believe a story, it just it's kind of scary.
It's scary. And it's very scary. I told people a long time ago, when they first started pushing this AI stuff and it was taking over every market you can think of, I was telling people this is not what we want. Eventually, they're going to get to the point where they're going to be able to frame people for stuff that they did not do. You can take people's voice. Like think about, I think some singer or actress or something like that actually sued some company because someone created some audio or a song or whatever in her with her voice, and it was all in good fun. But she didn't appreciate that. She's like, "Look, this is not me." And they didn't say anything crazy, but it's the fact that they were able to do it. That's scary. You can make full songs from musicians, and they never made it. Like I think someone made a full Eminem song that never existed, and then when the song was put out there,
Justin Bieber recently had a song about Diddy. Lost my soul at a Diddy party, and people were sending it to me, and I was like, "This isn't real, guys."
No, it's not real. And people fell for that immediately.
They did.
That's
scary. A lot of
That's
people.
Not what we want.
A lot of people sent me that video.
Yeah,
but it also it's a double-edged sword too, because on the other hand, let's say you do have a tape of Diddy doing something really awful, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's just AI. It's just deep fake.
Well, there was one. There was not a tape. It was a picture. I don't know if you saw it.
I saw it. Him and J-Lo.
Yeah. If you look closely enough, I'm like, that's not them.
Right. But my point was like, let's say you do have real dirt on somebody, right?
Yeah.
But they're powerful and they're rich and powerful, and they get a good lawyer that says, or they pay some off to say it's AI, right? Like everybody's going to go, well, there's no way we can tell. Like AI is so close to reality. I'm just saying it's a double-edged sword. Like you could frame someone, but you could also just get off of with whatever charges, just claiming it's a deep fake.
Everyone's desensitized now.
Yeah. Nobody knows what to believe.
We can do this at home.
Nobody knows what to believe. What is truth at this point? You know.
Yeah. I made a photo of you for other things, and I sent it to you, and I had you at a desk with a suit on. Yeah, and you had a desk with a suit on. It looks just like you.
It looked like me. Yeah, it looked real.
We could do this from a seat. We can do this from our own computers, our own phones. Anybody, any nutcase in the world.
All I need is $15 a month in Canva, and you can basically do it. You know what I'm saying?
That's all it takes.
Mid-journey, like it's not expensive and it's not hard.
And I believe these apps were made available to people like us for that reason. So we won't believe confuse the truth anymore.
Right? Because if you put so much chaff out there, nobody knows what to believe, and then they just stop caring about the truth. The truth is unknowable to people at that point. And therefore, people like the CIA can just do whatever they want, work within that chaos, right? So yeah. So one of the next things I found in this movie, scene doesn't happen next, but they talk about it next. They start talking about getting this girl who's going to fly in from Albania, and she's going to say all these things about the war, and she's going to convince the American people that there's a real war, and we're going to have this heart-touching moment, this heart-touching scene. And this has a real-life counterpart. Again, if the movie's based on the Gulf War, because I do believe it was. I do believe the movie was based on the Gulf War, but also telling us not just what did happen, but what always happens. So if we're looking at this as in being based on the Gulf War, this happened in something called the Niro testimony. A lot of people probably don't remember this. I'll just show you the Wikipedia. Again, I'm not saying Wikipedia is a great source, but this is really what happened. So the Niro testimony was a false testimony given before the United States Congress of Congressional Human Rights Caucus, October 10th, 1990. This was a precursor to invading Iraq for the Gulf War. It said, a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl who was publicly identified as Niro at the time in her testimony, which took place 2 months after the Iraq invasion of Kuwait, she claimed to have, sorry, I said precursor, but it was after the invasion, but before Operation Desert Storm. So we had Operation Desert Shield, where we were over there. Storm is when we invaded, or swept across. So she claimed to have witnessed Iraqi soldiers taking babies out of incubators at a Kuwait hospital before looting the incubators and leaving the babies to die on the floor. Her statements were widely publicized and cited numerous times in the United States Senate and by American President George H.W. Bush to continue the rationale for pursuing military action against Iraq. Her portrayal of Iraqi war crimes was aimed at further increasing global support for Kuwait against Iraqi occupation during the Gulf War, which resulted in the expulsion of Iraq troops from Kuwait by 42-country coalition led by the U.S. That is Operation Desert Storm. So we had Operation Desert Shield. We're over there. We're ready. And then this girl comes out with a completely fake testimony, and 42 countries swept across 3 countries in 3 days. It was the most successful military operation in all of human history. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's over-exaggerating it, but in American history, I would say this is the most successful military operation ever conducted, and it happened based on fake testimony. And that's exactly what they're doing in this movie. They get a girl and her mom, and she's cold in the rain. They're going to put a coat on her, and people are going to feel sorry, and they're going to believe the war crimes about the Albanians. And the Albanians over there scratching their heads going like, what the hell is this? And how do we refute it? How do we refute the American media machine? We can't.
It's scary and it's sad, honestly, dude. Yeah. There were videos of these people that kind of they were crisis actors, of course, right? It was the mother, I think the same thing. She was with her kid, all that kind of stuff. Everyone felt sorry for him. But then it didn't take long for the internet sleuths to figure out we've seen this lady before. We've seen her in several places. We saw her at Sandy Hook. We saw her over here.
Yep.
And just to lie to us, man. And a lot of it's about money. It's about money. It's about corruption. And, fortunately, people like us are the ones paying for this. The money's got to come from somewhere. So they're lying to us, telling us how to respond, but then at the same time, we're paying more tax dollars to foot the bill for a lie.
Right.
And if that doesn't make you distrust the government, I don't know what else will.
Right. Yeah. This next scene, I think, I want to play one scene, and it's, I think, the most pivotal scene of the movie. I think it's the best scene in the movie by far. But I just want to play, it's about 2 minutes long. I want to comment on it. So after they're discussing getting this girl to do her version of the Nariah testimony, they get pulled over by the CIA. And they get taken to this little Mexican dive bar, and they have a sit-down chat with the CIA. And it's just fascinating. So let's watch it. Let's comment on it. Tell me if you need me to pause it at any point. But yeah, this is by far the best scene in the movie.
Two things I know to be true. There's no difference between good flan and bad flan. And there is no war. Guess who I am?
I would like to point out that I am under medical care and taking medication, the side effects of which have rendered me a little...
Quite touching.
Well, I also take this opportunity to suggest that equally, I admit to nothing, and I would like my lawyer present.
We show, and NSA confirms, there are no nuclear devices on the Canadian border. There are no nuclear devices in Albania. Albania has no nuclear capacity. Our spy satellites show no secret terrorist training camps in the Albanian hinterland. The Border Patrol, the FBI, the RCMP report no untoward activity along our picturesque Canadian border. The Albanian government is screaming its defense. The world is listening. There is no war.
Of course there's a war. I'm watching it on television.
And who might you be when it's all said and done?
My name is Conrad Breen.
Who do you work for?
Nobody whose name you want me to say, Mr. Young, I promise you.
It's all well and good, but when the fit hits the shan, somebody's going to have to stay after school. Who do you suppose that might be?
I don't know what you're talking about.
The spy satellites show it, Mr. Breen. They show no war.
Then what good are they if they show no war? I mean, what are we spending $250 billion a year in the Defense Department? What good are they if they show nothing? And what, are they useless? Are they just broke or what? I mean, what is it?
I would like to point out further that these medications taken in conjunction...
If there's no threat, then where are you? Let me go you one more. If there's no threat, what good are you?
Mr. Breen, you are the threat.
I'm the threat. I am the threat. Well, what have I been doing the last 30 years that you haven't been doing? You want to fill me in on that?
The last 30 years, Mr. Breen, I have been working to ensure the security of my country.
As have we all, and I would like to point out that the security of this country...
But if forced to choose between the security of your country and the security of your job, which would you pick?
And while you hesitate, permit me to suggest that they are one and the same, your country and your job.
I'm doing my job, Mr. Breen. That's what you see me doing.
I'm doing my job.
What is it you are doing?
I'm
That's
doing
what
my
I would
job
like to
too.
know.
And let me ask you something. Let me ask you a simple question. Why do people go to war? Why do they go to war?
I'll play your silly game.
Okay, why do they go to war?
To ensure their way of life.
Would you go to war to do that?
I have.
And if you went to war again, who would it be against? Huh? Your ability to fight a two-ocean war against who?
Who? Sweden and Togo?
That time is past. It's over. The war of the future is nuclear terrorism. It is, and it'll be against a small group of dissidents who, unbeknownst perhaps to their own governments, have blah, 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 blah. And to go to that war, you have to be prepared. You got to be alert. The public has got to be alert, because that is the war of the future. And if you're not gearing up to fight that war, then eventually the axe will fall, and you're going to be out in the street. And you could call this a drill, you could call this job security, you could call it anything you like. But I got one for you. You said go to war to preserve your way of life. Well, Chuck, this is your way of life. And if your spy satellites don't see nothing, if there ain't no war, then you can go home and prematurely take up golf, my friend. Because there ain't no war but ours.
That scene, every time I watch it, man, there's so much to unpack there. So let's just go through it. I mean, you and I are the CIA. We're the CIA guys. The girl, she's like the social media site. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? She's trying to run this control, like, hey, just so you know, this may or may not be true. I'm putting this out there right now. I'm not a part of this, and he is like, he's the administration. Mm-hmm. They know we know what the truth is. And they know we have it. We saw through all this.
We see all through your smoke and mirrors. This doesn't make sense. Everything you guys are telling us is going on is not going on because people like us did our research. It doesn't make sense. You know it doesn't make sense. We know you're lying, but you're still trying to tell me that what I'm seeing and what I know to be true is not true. This is exactly what we're seeing right now. Like, the CIA guy is a conspiracy theorist that found out what's going on.
Right, yeah.
And Robert De Niro is the administration that's telling you, look, we know you know, but what you know is not what you know. What the truth is that we did it because of this, but we're not telling you we did it. It's just, this is
so fascinating because I didn't think about it from that aspect. But right now, I've had so many conversations with people in the last few months that have all come to the same conclusion that World War III is inevitable, or a big war is inevitable, and that a war is the only way to fix our economy. So if you're saying it from that aspect, right, is like, look, you want to preserve your way of life? This is how you preserve your way of life. We know that you know it's BS, right? We know that you know that we've manufactured this whole outcome. But if you want the economy to recover, then you're going to go along with it. I think that's true if you're talking about the American people. What I also think is true is that this movie is both a threat to it's making threats to Hollywood, open threats to Hollywood of how they're going to end up working with the CIA now that Chase Brandon's in town. But I also think that this is a movie that the CIA is going to watch. And the case here is so fascinating because he's like, look, if your satellites don't pick up what we tell you to, then you're worthless. In the 90s, the CIA is facing a budget crisis. 2001 happens, Twin Towers get hit, CIA is rolling in money, right? Because what was the narrative? The narrative was that if the CIA had more money, they could have prevented 9/11, right? So that happens. And then he says, the war of the future, again, 4 years before 9/11, the war of the future is nuclear terrorism. It's a dissident bunch of people somewhere in the Middle East who are probably doing something unbeknownst to their own government. I mean, it's just predicting and telling us what the CIA has planned in order to justify their jobs so they don't have to prematurely take up golf. That scene is so packed full of stuff. It's just maybe one of the most brilliantly written scenes I've ever seen in a movie. I mean, David Mamet's a talented writer. I think this is David Mamet speaking in this scene. But holy crap, dude. Like that scene is just wild to me.
Well, that's what I love it. And if you look at Robert De Niro's demeanor while when dude is exposing everything and he's like, this is not true, there's no war, drone footage, all that kind of stuff. Or aerial footage, he said. Yeah. And you know what's funny? I think I remember someone trying to run drones over some of course there's always something happening, right?
It's always something with drones too.
Always something. And they were trying to get drone footage and they were literally shooting the drones down. I
saw that recently too. I don't remember what it was, but people were shooting drones down.
Right.
Yeah.
But why? It tells you exactly what we just saw here. You know, everyone's going to see there's nothing going on. And what about the other staged things that happen? What around COVID? I'm always going to bring up the COVID times and all that kind of stuff and other natural disasters and things. I think
it's the biggest psyop in American history, though, in a way. COVID, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then so I understand these natural disasters did happen. There's speculation as to how they happen. I don't know, but in
case I have to edit this later, we had a hiccup in the stream. And I lost Daryl for a minute, so I'll try to edit this together to make sense. But continue with where you think you were at, and I'll try to make this make sense in post.
I think I remember. Just talking about some of these staged events where you had crisis actors, and some people were able to expose that a lot of these were literally sets. And I wish I had more specific instances. I don't know why everything's escaping me today. Call it fatigue.
Well, there was the White House set in Georgia, and then the same time that Tyler Perry builds a White House set in Georgia, we find out that the Oval Office has a fake set across the street, and people were calling it out online saying that's not the Oval Office. And then the government had to admit that, yep, Biden's filming not in the Oval Office. That's a real thing that happened.
That's true. I remember that now.
So there's all kinds of fakery going on.
Right. Well, think about it. Tyler Perry has a show called The Oval, and if you ever watched that show, have you ever seen that?
I haven't seen it, but that's what that's what the Oval Office was supposedly built for. Right. I think we've used it for faking stuff too. But
I wonder for how long too. So for me though, I'm not into his stuff, but that show exposes a lot too.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the timing of it is.
Maybe I'll cover it on here at some point.
Yeah, and that show ties into another show called Ruthless, where they're running a compound, and on this compound they're trafficking kids, they're trafficking drugs, they're working with the cartel, and the cartel is working with governors and senators to traffic the girls. But this show ties into the White House, and they know all these two shows tie together.
Right.
So I'm like, I don't think Tyler Perry's on the right side of things. I don't think so at all.
I don't think so either.
You can't rub elbows with Oprah and be on the right side of things.
Right.
But I think he's making these shows for a reason, especially The Oval. And the show is on hiatus right now. I don't know. You can speculate on what's going on with that, but I think he's kind of waiting to write the rest of it because the show is in a certain weird point right now. It's a very weird point where the show is right now, and I think he stopped before the election for a reason because I'm like he knows what direction to go. But if you kind of look at the characters and how they're mapped out, they're very much. In a lot of ways, it was more symbolic when the series first started. A little less so now, but it's still exposing the corruption and how the president can get away with murder, literal murder in this show, literal murder, sexual misconduct, drugs. He dude's a dope head. I mean, the show is exposing a lot, So I like, in one sense, it is a fake set what Tyler Perry built, but I'm like, it had to be Tyler Perry for a reason. I don't know. I just don't trust the guy. But anyway, I'm saying that. Who knows how long we truly been lied to and in so many different ways. And that's why I try to get people to open their eyes, dude. Like, you can't just look at the headlines. You can't just look at what CNN or even Fox News, for that matter, tells you. They're still the media.
Agreed.
You got to do your own research. It doesn't take that much.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't trust the media. I mean, that's the truth of it. And I want to bring up one last thing that he said in that scene. Well, first of all, he keeps calling this a pageant. I think that that's the point that we're supposed to get across is like the pageant is beyond the war, right? It's not just that the Albanian war is the pageant. It's that all of politics is a pageant. All of this presidency is a pageant, right down to Dustin Hoffman writing a speech for the president that's completely made up and fake and makes people cry. It's all a pageant, right? But he says, there's no war, right? The CIA guy comes to me and says there's no war. But what Robert De Niro says is, of course there's a war. I saw it on TV. And he's telling you, he's like, that's all that people need to know. All they need to know is they saw it on TV, right?
Right.
If they saw it on TV, it exists. And that is the reality, the nature of our reality at this point. If you saw it on TV,
the way
it happens,
he said
right?
that too, the way he said that to him, like, yeah, it's on TV.
Yeah.
He's literally telling you what other people are going to be thinking and saying. Exact thing.
Yeah. What's interesting is after this, we get this scene where they're making this really cheesy 90s song for the war. We love the American Dream or some crap, and which I found just kind of comical. But right after this, we get a scene that I didn't expect to happen, and that is that the CIA ends up kind of blowing the whistle on this, but not really. What they do is they're like, okay, you're right. If we didn't see it, then it didn't happen. People defund us. So what we'll do is we'll just end the war. We'll just say, yep, there was a war. We ended it. It's all over. It's all good. And now they're panicking because it's like, well, there's 11 days or something till the election. Like, we need something to carry us through because as soon as this war is over, that story about the Girl Scouts coming back out. It's coming out of the closet. And so this is where they actually do get an Act 2, right? They said they didn't need an Act 2. They just needed the war to last 11 days. Now they get an Act 2, and we get this whole scene where the Fad King, literally, like, Robert De Niro calls up the Pentagon and is like, hey, I need these classified files. Hands the phone to this guy called the Fad King, whose whole job is to manufacture fads, right? I was saying that this is not unrelated, but not very important. But I remember when, like, every girl for, like, every white woman, every basic white woman needed a Coleman thermos. All of a sudden it was a fashion statement. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, who did Coleman pay to, like, make people believe that was natural? Like, the fact that all of you believe that this brand, this $30 thermos is like your personality, like, that didn't happen naturally. No way. Someone paid for that. And that's the whole point of the Fad King, is he's showing, like, you think that this thing happened naturally, and he's able to get people to, like, come up with this whole shoe thing, right? So they come up with old shoe that people are going to throw their shoes, because what happened is, the story that's going to last since the war is over is that there's an American soldier trapped behind enemy lines. His name is William Schuman. And what they do here is so fascinating. Not only do they have the Fad King manufacture this whole thing about throwing shoes up into trees or whatever, but then they literally have Willie Nelson write a song put it onto vinyl, make it sound scratchy, and then bury it in the Library of Congress and start spreading rumors. There's a song called Old Shoe that would be perfect for this. And that part I found gets overlooked. But what the movie's saying there is essentially is like, not only can we fake today's history, but we can rewrite the past. And we can place it in places where you think that it's legitimate and old, right? Like we can literally put stuff in the Library of Congress and date it a certain date, and that's going to sell for like, we've changed the past now. We've changed history in that way. So like the deception is just growing at this point. Yeah, man, this whole thing with Shoe. What do you want to say about Sergeant Shoe? I mean, another thing I wanted to point out, we were talking about Tyler Perry's studio earlier. He built it on 330 acres, by the way. 33 with a 0.
Right.
Which is another reason not to trust him.
I didn't think about that.
But in this movie, we get another 33 symbolism, and that is that William Schuman is part of Unit 303. So I found that interesting. We get the 33 there, right? So, right.
Okay.
Yeah. So with Schuman, they sell this whole thing, you know, Courage Mom is like written into his sweater in Morse code, and they're going to bring him back. And the president gives this heartfelt speech on TV and all this stuff. So everybody is now fascinated with one person. It just comes down to this one guy, this manufactured story. So William Schuman is played by Woody Harrelson. And like the twist here, because it's like it's a dark comedy. Everything goes wrong, right? So the twist here is that they pulled him from a military prison because he's a psycho who raped a nun, right? So now they don't know how to sell this guy, and they're trying to figure out what to do. Their plane crashes, and this crazy scene plays out where they are rescued by an illegal immigrant, which they keep making a point in the movie, like the president cannot be, like he cannot be associated with illegal immigrants before the election, which was just kind of maybe a commentary on the time of Bill Clinton. And you know what I mean? So, because Clinton was tough on the border back then, and then, you know, then it was racist to be tough on the border after that. Anyway, ends up, he tries to rape this farmer's daughter, this gas station owner's daughter, gets shot with a shotgun. And it's like kind of again, dark, in a dark comedy sense, it's a hilarious scene. It's like really funny, right? It's
hard to laugh at it because he does die, but it's just
the way he dies though is pretty freaking hilarious though. Like Dustin Hoffman runs in, he's like, "Oh, it's fine, he's not dead." Okay, he's dead. Like it's funny. It's funny, right? So
it really is.
Again, they're screwed, and they're like, "How are we gonna? We're still days away from the election. What are we gonna? How are we gonna spin this?" And they say, "Well, what's better than an American hero coming home? It's a dead American hero coming home, right?" Is essentially the idea. And they have this funeral, and this is one of the we're getting towards the end of the movie here, but they have this funeral. And Dustin Hoffman and Robert De Niro are like, "We did it, right? Like the election's coming up. Nobody's talking about the scandal. We've made it through 2 weeks without people talking about the scandal. This whole thing is entirely fake. It's entirely BS. And the American people are at home crying. They're eating it up. They have something to believe in. And they believe that the president that's in office now did this, right? He brought this guy home, yada, yada, yada." And this is where Dustin Hoffman, who throughout the whole movie keeps getting offered this ambassadorship. He's like, "I don't want an ambassadorship. I'm a producer in Hollywood. I want to be in Hollywood doing coke and drinking mimosas by my pool." Like that's what he wants. He's like, "Why would I want an ambassadorship?" But he keeps saying, he's like, "Nah, it's cool. I'm doing this because this is the most fun I've ever had since live television." And, you know, he keeps making a joke. It's a story to tell. And Robert De Niro keeps going, "Well, you know, you can't tell this story. We'll kill you."
Right, exactly.
Like that's this back and forth. But he finally gets fed up with it. And he basically is just like, "I'm going to tell people." Like that's how he walks away. He's like, "I want credit." And it comes down to these political ads. It comes back to the beginning of the movie with the news media is saying that the political ads are what change elections. And I find it funny because like, I've never believed this. Like I've never understood. I just think it's money laundering to be honest with you. I've never understood people that actually believe political ads are what change people's minds. I just don't think it does. I think the media does.
I don't think so either.
I don't think political ads mean jack shit to anyone personally.
No.
I've never met someone who's swayed by a political ad in my life.
I don't think so. I think by then people already made up their mind. One 15, 20-second commercial, a smear commercial is not going to change anything at all.
I don't think so. And I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
Like this stupid commercial I saw the other day where first of all, the voice didn't sound like Trump. The audio didn't match what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to say that he said something about rich people. He's going to pretty much make them richer. And then some idiot parroted that to me today on TikTok saying, well, he's going to make the rich richer. I'm like, did you get that from the commercial? Because
maybe they do something, right? But like, I think the point in the movie is like everybody thinks it's the political ads, but it's something deeper than that. It's Operation Mockingbird. It's media manipulation. It's fake stories. Like, and he wants to tell that story. He's like, I just produced the greatest play ever produced ever, and yet the media is claiming that the political ads are it. So this pisses him off, and there's this like really. As evil as these people are when you think about it, right? There's still this like buddy relationship throughout the movie, this growing fondness for each other of Robert De Niro and Dustin Hoffman. And again, it's a dark comedy, but they're kind of likable. Yeah, and you kind of like their relationship. You kind of like that they've become friends and they respect each other because the whole point of their characters is they're good at their jobs, right? So like the morality's been thrown out the window from the beginning, from the opening scene where it's like, who cares if we raped a girl? Like no morality in this movie, but you like the relationship. And within 5 seconds of them standing there drinking coffee together, being best friends, that goes from that to Robert De Niro literally giving the order to the Secret Service to have this guy killed. Like it's that quick. And that's like the dark part of the dark comedy here, right? And it ends with Stanley at his funeral, and we find out that the president won the reelection and that Albania has claimed credit for an attack that they definitely didn't commit, right? This is who's this, right? This is Al-Qaeda, right? Al-Qaeda is claiming credit for attacks they don't do. We've known this forever. And the American government knew that they could blame 9/11 on Al-Qaeda, that they could blame whatever they wanted to on Al-Qaeda because Al-Qaeda wants to look like they did it, right? Exactly. They want to look more competent than they are. So they knew they'd take that bait. And this is exactly what happens at the end of the movie. Stanley dies, president's reelected, and Albanian terrorists are claiming credit for the fake attacks that were made up because they want to inspire terror. So they do, and they're sending troops back in.
Yep.
I just found this whole thing fascinating. But there's one thing I got to say about Stanley really quick, and then I want to get your whole thoughts on this ending. Is Stanley a stand-in for Stanley Kubrick, wanting to talk about things and then getting?
That was the first thing I thought about when I saw the name Stanley.
That was
first thing I thought about. Yeah. I mean, the end of the movie it's because it should be upsetting to people, you know, and it should raise a lot of red flags. We're never really going to know the truth about what's been going on, even now. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take. I don't know if we'll ever know. And so, this movie should put everyone on high alert. It should piss people off. It should scare people. It really should make everyone do their own digging. And to see after everything this guy went through at the end, there was still that. It was still that thing that he had where, you know what, I'm going to protect myself at all costs, even if I have to eliminate someone that I've grown to care about or whatever. Everyone has to go.
I mean, it's so cold from Conrad Breen.
Very much.
Yeah.
And it was like not even with a second thought. Okay, this is what you're going to do. This is what I'm going to do.
Not we're going to tune him up. We're going to talk to him. It's just take him out and kill him. We'll call it a heart attack.
Gotta go. And we know the Clintons are good for that. And so,
right.
You know, it's just that's a good
perfect movie to come out during the Clinton administration, by the way.
Right. Perfect.
Which is fine. Again, I think the movie's trying to point fingers at Bush, but like in retrospect, watching this is like, well, this is just the Clinton campaign.
Yeah.
The Clinton administration.
It exposes all of them.
It is. It's all of them too, right? Like this is beyond partisan politics at this point, right?
Yeah.
They've all done these things.
Yep.
They've all done these things.
What about the supposed drowning of Obama's chef?
Right. Yeah. Did we cover that together on Unhinged a while back? Maybe not. Maybe that wasn't the episode we did together. I don't remember.
We did something.
We talked about it, but it was around that time. I remember the drowning of Obama's chef, and it's like, did he really drown in like 5 feet of water when he's like this surfer dude and stuff? Yeah.
Or I was going to say, apparently he had experience in the water.
Yeah.
But then, he couldn't survive that. Yeah. And so, we know that they do this. They execute people all the time. And, you know, this should put everyone on high alert.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's a movie and people are going to see it as such. It's a movie. And it's sad, but that's the reality of it. And they're exposing exactly how people are going to look at it by making this film. In the film, they're showing you what people are going to think.
It's super meta, right? I mean, it literally like it's you watching this like the movie itself are being kind of psyoped and misdirected, and your attention's being driven in other places, just like the American people are in the movie as well. Like it is so, again, I can't praise how well done this movie is enough, even though I hate what it's saying and ultimately hate what it is. Like it's just such a well done film.
Yep.
So
it's a mission accomplished film for sure.
Oh yeah, the CIA did top-notch work with Hollywood on this one, which again, that's the meta narrative. The CIA is literally behind the scenes working on this movie about the CIA working with Hollywood to produce to give disinformation to the American people.
And that's why I would encourage everybody to watch every film you could find that is about CIA, about FBI, because golly, dude, you realize how many movies are out there and there's always a daggone CIA operative or ex-CIA or someone they're trying to frame for something they found out. Now they're on the run, trying to keep the blame from being put on them. Every other movie is CIA or FBI. Yeah. It never fails. And so it tells you a lot there. But I would encourage everybody to there's actually a website. I don't remember what it is, but just Google conspiracy theory movies, and they have a top 10. And this movie is actually one of them. But Wag the Dog is, I think,
it deserves to be in the top 10. I
believe it's in the top 5 or so, or top 2 or 3 on most websites. But I would encourage everybody to watch conspiracy theory movies because it's going to show you truth. Conspiracy theory is not a conspiracy theory. It's truth.
I'll take it one step further. I would encourage people to watch the conspiracy movie, then watch, share, like, subscribe, all that stuff to Real Conspiracies. We'll break it down here. We'll talk about all the hidden symbolism and all that stuff. And I want to just ask you guys watching this to please give this a 5-star review anywhere you listen to it. All of that good stuff. It's new. We're just getting this thing growing. So all of that stuff really helps. But yeah, man, I agree. There's so much to be hidden in movies. There's so much there. I want to thank you so much, Daryl, for coming on, doing this episode with me. I'm glad you suggested this movie. I'm glad that you suggested it at the time you did, because I wasn't even thinking about it at the time. And I think it's a perfect movie in the lead up to the 2024 election. So thank you for that. Do you want to plug where people can find you? No, it was an honor to come on here, man. I'm always trying anyway to come on here with any chance I get. But we'll do it again, man, for sure.
But you can find me YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, all under Unifier TV. I put the dot in all of them. I think I did. Either way, if you just search Unifier TV, even if it's without the dot, I'm sure it'll come up. But all those platforms, I'm more active on TikTok and Instagram, though. YouTube is a process because they like to censor everything.
Oh yeah.
So I'm working on building there, but I'm there. So.
Awesome, man. Well, I'll include all of your links in the show description. Go follow unifier.tv, Instagram, YouTube, all of that good stuff. And until next time, everyone, keep it real.